Hello, everyone. Excuse me. Welcome back to our notes. This is lesson 5.2. We're going to start off with some vocab. Corresponding parts. Corresponding parts are just parts or pieces or places of a shape of a polygon that are in the same relative location in another shape. Okay, so they go together, like top left, top right, top right. All right. So those are corresponding parts. Now, when we start talking about triangles, when triangles are congruent, which means the two triangles have the exact same size and the exact same like measurements, then we have reflexive, symmetric, and transitive properties between the triangles. Okay, that's all this means. Okay, so we can um, just use those reflexive, symmetric, and transitive properties between the triangles. We don't really use those a lot in this class, but they do have those same properties. Now, what we do want to talk about is this third angles theorem. This says if two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another triangle, then the third angles are also congruent. Now, this goes down back to the triangle sum theorem. If I have two angles that are congruent in both, let's say the sum here is 80 in both of these, that means the third angle in both also has to be 100 because they would have the triangle sum theorem applied. So again, if two angles are congruent, we can then go right directly to the third angle is congruent by the third angles theorem. Now, one thing you know about congruent, I would say shapes is that congruent parts, corresponding parts of congruent shapes are also congruent. Now, also look at the naming. When we have a naming convention, sort of like triangle ABC is congruent, triangle DEF, naming matters because the first letter corresponds with the first letter. The second letter corresponds with the second, and the third has to correspond with the third. So when you are given a name, you don't really have to look at the shape to name all the parts. So I'm not going to do all these because number two takes a long time. So let's look at number one. Now, if we didn't look at the names, let's say I didn't have the names with the congruent statement. So this right here is what I call a congruent statement. I'd have to look and say angle R is congruent to angle U because they both have one arc mark. Angle Q is congruent to angle T because they both have two arc marks. And angle P is congruent to S. They both have three arc marks. And then to look at congruent sides, I'd have to go from one arc mark to two. So RQ is congruent to UT. Could go from 1 to 2. From 2 to 3 is QP. 2 to 3 here is TS. And then from 3 to 1 is PR, and that's SU. Now, because we have a congruent statement, here's what we can do is I can write these in order. I can say angle P, angle Q, angle R, because they go in order of what we see here. So they have the orders P, Q, R, and I can write them STU right in order. So I can say congruent, congruent, congruent to angles STU. Now that's for angles. For sides, I can do the first two. I can say PQ is congruent to ST. Then I can say QR is congruent to TU. Then I can do first and last. I can say PR is congruent to SU. It's really quick and easy. And we can do that for number two, but it just takes time because now you're going to have four angles and then four sides. So that's just going to be eight more things to write. The same thing works. All right, so let's go down to number three here. Finding the values now. So this is the idea of corresponding parts. Now, what I see here is my sides. One, I see the congruence mark. So for Y, if I see some congruent marks with ST and XZ, I can just say that 15 equals 3Y plus 9. So when I solve, I'm going to get 6 equals 3Y. So Y equals 2. Really easy. Now, before we assume S and Y are the same, let's just double check Y and S correspond with each other with the congruent statement. So that means with S and Y, I can now put down that 2x minus 20 equals 30. When I solve, I get 2x equals 50, so x is 25. Now, number four, which one's which? So let's see. A corresponds with E. So our 60 plus AX is equal to the 108. So go ahead and solve. We get AX equals 48. And then when you divide that by 8, you get X equals 6. There's the first part. Now, um, let's look at this next one. I have to put 6 in. So 8y minus 3 times 6, that's going to give me 8y minus 18. So that's for G. Now, if I look, G corresponds with C, which is 62. So I can equal that to 62. That means 8y equals 80. So y equals 10. All right, let's go to the next page. Show the polygons are congruent. So we have to do some explaining here. So to show they're congruent, I want to show that the corresponding parts are all congruent. So what's going to happen here is I know that through my reflexive property, so I can say that DB is congruent to DB because of the reflexive property. And then I already see that AB and is congruent. So that would be some CB because they both show the congruent marks. And I also see A to D is congruent to C to D. Trying to keep the order the same. All right, angles. So what happens, I also know angle A is already congruent to angle C. And I know that angle ADB is congruent to angle CDB, because those are a linear pair. They're going to be supplementary, so I know this is also going to be 90 here. And then the third angles theorem is going to say that angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD. So now I have reasons for all of those, and now I have all the corresponding parts are congruent. And I would do the same thing with number 6. Now, with number 6, you would just have to line up everything with the sides. So again, it's just showing all four angles have a partner and all four sides have a partner. But since all the markings that are there, you don't really have to write anything. You just see it with the marks. And then number 7 and 8. Let's look at number 7. Number seven's a little silly, I think, because they give us the congruent marks here. So this is 33 degrees. We know that the measure of angle 1 is 33 degrees because of our congruent marks. So a little silly there. But number 8, let's look at number 8. Number 8, some things that stick out to me is I can use my triangle sum theorem to figure out this angle here. So if I take 180 and I subtract 80 and then 54, you get 46 degrees. So this is 46 degrees. This is 46 degrees. And I know that because they both have the congruent marks. So there we go. Angle 1's 46 degrees because I used my triangle sum theorem. I guess I should show that really quick. I could say that the measure of angle U plus 54 plus 80 equals 180. And then I can get the measure of angle U equals 46 degrees. And now, because these are congruent angles based on the marks that I see, I now can see that angle 1 is also 46 degrees. All right. Those are your notes for today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask. If not, we'll either see you in class or in the next video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.